So in this video, we're going to review the use of procedures and functions in Python. A procedure or function is a way to break up your code into smaller chunks. So you put some of the utility into a procedure, and then you can call or function, and then you can call that from your main part of your code to do some work for you. And it's just a way to break the code down and make it easier to read. Now, the difference between a procedure and a function is that a procedure does not return anything back to the code that called it, whereas a menu does via a built-in command called a return statement. So we have two pieces of code here that does the same work. Both of these are going to print out a menu with two very simple options. You can continue or you can stop, so that doesn't really do anything. In the first example, we are using a procedure to do that. So the procedure print menu prints out the menu and the two options for us, whereas the function menu string returns back a string that we can then just print, and when we do that, it will print out the menu exactly in the exact same format as up here. So we can run this, and you see that you get two copies of the exact same menu. One is done as a procedure, one as a function. You might wonder why you would want to use a function over a procedure. The whole thing looks simpler when you do this as a procedure, and I think probably for this case there's some validity to that. We just want to print some things to the screen. The one advantage to using a function is that when you get this string back, if you wanted to modify it in your code somehow, you could do that. We could append something on or something like that. So a lot of times functions have the advantage that when they return something back, you can use that return value any way you want. Okay, so now we're going to look at using parameters that we're going to pass into our procedures and functions. So you can pass in options that modify how the procedure or function behaves depending on the value of the option. So this is a little bit more complicated system for our menu. We have here a function, see it's returning a value, that takes in a list of options and then prints those options out. So this is going to be a list. In fact, I have the list defined down here that's eventually going to get passed up there. So it takes this list, it creates a string. This string is going to be the menu. So it starts off with menu, and then for things in the options, it appends those things, item, to the list, or to the string, sorry, with a carriage return, and then returns the entire thing. So when this is done, it's going to say menu, new line, print menu, new line, continue, new line, and stop. Stop is the last option within the new line. So all those things are going to be added to our string, and we're going to return that. So this is what's going to get printed to the screen. We have here another function. It returns a value choice. This prints the options, or prints the menu to the screen, and then asks the user to input their choice. So we see that happening here, and we see the printing of the menu, but there's a lot of other stuff going on in here. So the list of options gets passed in, so we see that, and then there's a new function in here that checks to see if the user is making a valid choice. And the way that works, we pass in the number of options, and then we pass in the list of options. Sorry, we don't pass in the number of options. We pass in the choice that the user has made, and then we pass in the list of options and check to see if they've made a valid choice. And we're expecting here an integer, so in this case the integer should be 1, 2, or 3. Now, we're putting this in a while loop, and a while loop says while we don't have a valid choice, keep printing the menu options and asking the user to input their choice. In order for this while loop to run the first time, we have to make sure that the choice that the user is making is initially set to something that's outside the range. Now, this list could change. We could add more menu items in here, so we don't want to just put this equal to 4. So what I've done is said, well, how many options do we have? Compute the length of the options list, add 1 to that. That's going to be our first choice. We know that's out of range. It might have been simpler to just put it to 0, but you never know. Somebody could put a 0 option in here. So This is probably a better choice. So we're passing in an invalid choice the first time and a list of options. And what valid choice does is takes the choice that we have, checks, converts that to an integer. This is a string. Check, and then we just check well, we just check to see if check is in between 1 and the length of the option list. And if that's the case, we return false, true. And if it's not, we return false. Notice that we've defined a function inside of a function, so that we only need to do this valid choice inside of here. And instead of putting all this code here in a while loop or somewhere else, we decided to just make this a separate function that we can call very easily. Nobody else needs to know that this functionality exists, so I put it inside the function menu. So here's our code. Again, we have, this is sort of the main part of what's going on here. We have a list of menu items. Those get passed into menu. Menu initially sets choice, the user's choice, to be something outside of the range of possible choices. Checks to see if we have a valid choice, and it'll say, nope, you don't. So then it's going to say, okay, print the menu out. So here we print the menu options, that's up here. And then we ask the user to input their choice. And then if it comes up here and checks to see if they have a valid choice, and if they do, it's just going to return the choice back to the calling program. And if it doesn't, then it'll just keep doing that and asking for more choices until something valid is inputted by the user. When all of that is done, menu has returned back our choice to us, and then we can print out which option was chosen. So we can print out you chose, and then we'll take our choice, which is a string, convert that to an integer, subtract 1 because lists are indexed from 0, so this is 0, 1, and 2, and then plug that in to get out the name of the option that was chosen. Okay, that's an awful lot of work to just demonstrate the fact that you can pass options or parameters into a function or a procedure, but here it goes. Running parameters. So there we go. It prints out the menu, and the choices are print menu, continue, and stop. So this right here is where we called this command, and it comes up here and compiles together the menu list. And then we can put our choice in down here, and if we choose 0, then it checks that choice up here and see it says, oh, that's not in the right range. In this case, it should be 1 to 3, so try again. We can try 4, 5, be kind of mule-headed about this. And it's just going to keep executing this while loop until I put in a valid choice. So maybe I can put in 2, which is a valid choice, and it says you chose. That's this. And then it prints out, it goes, it says, oh, let's see, your choice was 2. So I'm going to convert that to an integer 2, subtract 1. So now I am looking at index 1, 0, 1, and this list is 2. Continue. And it prints that out. Okay, now you don't have to pass all parameters in. So in this list right here, oh, I hope I didn't do anything. In this list of options, we see one option. Here we see one option. This actually has 2 parameters that can be passed in. But what if you want to have an optional parameter? Well, in this case, I'm going to print out the menu again. It's very similar to what I had before, but I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to have an optional parameter called blank lines, and blank lines is going to put blank lines in between each item in the menu. So if I want an extra blank line here, then I'm going to have an option to put that in. So this is expected to be an integer. So we should start off again as a string s is menu with a new line. And then we're doing the same thing we did before. We have an options list. So for the items in that options list, which will be print menu, continue, and stop, we're going to append them onto the string with a new line. And then if we want extra blank lines, so if blank lines maybe is 1 or 2 or 3, we're going to do a for loop and just keep adding blank lines onto string. And then after that's done, we'll go up, we'll get the next item in the list, Add that on, add more blank lines, and continue until we're through with all the items in the list. And then I'll return that back to the calling program. Now notice that menu looks like it has 2 parameters, but down here I've only called it with 1. Now over here in this, where we were before, if I try to call menu without any parameters, I am going to get yelled at. And it's going to say, hey, you're supposed to have an argument in here, or a parameter, and you didn't have one. But with an optional parameter, then I don't have to pass that in. And the reason why this is considered optional is because I've given this parameter here a default value. So if I don't pass this in, if I don't put in a value here, it's just going to assume it's 0 and won't print any extra lines. But I can, if I want to, pass in the value 1 to print in 1 extra line for every item in the list. So let's run this. And so initially, when I don't pass in the parameter, then I get the original looking menu. But when I pass in, put in 1 extra line between each one, then I get a menu that looks like that. I guess I could put 2 extra lines in between each one. It's not making it look any better, but we can do it. We now have that power. So optional parameters are nice. It allows you to change the behavior of your procedure or function, but it also gives you a default to fall back on.